Welcome to the SPL Rundown. I'm your host, APM, here with three wonderful guests. We have former SPL player Adapting, former SPL coach AlphaJackal, and SPL caster Dolson to break down all of the Phase 3 Week 3 action. Stick around a little bit later for my interview with PolarbearMike, the support for the Jade Dragons. But first, let's break down Week 3 of Phase 3 of the SPL, starting with the Tardis Titans versus the Valhalla Valkyries. This is sort of just a Titans dominate everything here. You know, I think the main thing that stood out to me about this score is just how many kills Layers got. I think he got like 16 kills in the whole set, and I don't think the Valks ever got more than 5 kills in either of these games. Just a pretty dominant win from the Titans. You know, and we even saw Cyclone play the set ADC again. That just maybe a bit of something that he likes to bring out against the teams he thinks he can beat, or, you know, is there something more to this set that we really need to discuss, or is it just Titans dominating as per usual?
Well, with the set pick, I think that's so back in last year when I was putting in Radiance, we would play some set. Obviously, we didn't have any success with it in our actual SPL games. Mm-hmm. But Cyclone was really good at playing it in lane, and it was like good for pressure and just like the 1v1. And then like in team fights, you just kind of play like you can poke, and then you can also like if you're the last one in, you can also take kind of like a hyper carry.
Yeah, clean up a little bit.
But I think the point is just because of how strong assassins are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All the assassin items buff, so it's just really good in lane. Bombas works well. I assume he went Bombas. I don't remember.
Yeah, he went Bombas Dagger to begin with. Didn't hit level 20 because they ended the game in 18 minutes.
Yeah.
He can upgrade it for what it was going to go into, but yeah, the items that you get for ADCs that sort of transitioning into what the junglers would usually pick up in terms of items. You know, your Transcendence, you see some Heartseekers go for Hunters as well, those ability-based ones. Set just really synergizes extremely well with those, can go into the Bombas Hammer or Bombas Spear, both really good on him. And if you pair it with something like the Soul in mid lane like they did, you don't really lose the fact that you don't have an ADC, you just have another long-range poke-based god and could just start to try and all-in the team fights and try and collapse on them to survive.
Yeah, I think Cyclone has shown us that he likes some of the eclectic picks. Feels like even within the Hunter tab, he'll be one of the first ones to... Him and Pandacat both seem like the first guys who will roll down to some of those different-looking picks. The matchup in particular, though, I felt bad for the Valkyries because if you remember back, the final matchup last week, and the final matchup in week 2, the Kings beat the Titans 2-0. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like this was going to be a Titans team that was going to come out with a little bit of vengeance early on in this week. Every matchup's important. I'm sure the Titans were feeling pretty confident, but off of a loss, the last game you got to experience was a 2-0 loss to the Kings. So I think the writing was kind of on the wall for me on this one. I think the Titans kind of refocused themselves after what was a tough loss to a top team in the league. And it was just unfortunate that the Valkyries happened to be the team on the other end.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I totally feel that. I think we see this happen pretty often with SPL teams where they have sort of a bad loss. Everyone kind of kicks it into gear a little bit, you know, and they show up a little bit more motivated maybe for the next week.
Well, this is the time of year where you really have to do that. We have 5 more days, or we have week 4, and then I think we do like a kind of a half 2-day week towards the end for the last couple matchups. And everyone's gunning for top 2, so you can pick everyone. You pick the other team's groups, and a lot of the top teams are all within 1 or 2 wins of one another right now. And so you kind of have to buckle down on the back end of a loss, and the Titans have shown now, after what we saw in this matchup, that they're able to bounce back, and that's an important trend moving into the next phase of the year and Worlds and all that.
Any other thoughts about this set? Maybe keep it short and sweet here. There's not too much really to glean from this other than, Valks need to get to the States ASAP.
When a set ends in 38 minutes, there's not really much to talk about, unfortunately.
I mean, fingers crossed. I think I've heard that a lot of the Valks do have their visas and stuff, or are getting interviews in the sort of upcoming weeks and month here, hopefully. So, you know, things are looking good for, I think, all the EU players in terms of getting over here before Worlds, I think. So that would be great for all these players, for sure. Next set of the week here was the Olympus Bolts versus the Camelot Kings. And like you said, the Kings were able to beat the Titans 2-0 last week. Kind of expected a little bit more from the Kings in this set. They do get beaten 2-0 by the Bolts. I think Game 1 was really in the Kings' control, but they weren't really able to hold on. And then Game 2 was just sort of a 1v1 showdown between Twig and Lasbra. Are you guys worried about the Kings at all here? Because, you know, we've seen them sort of falter a little bit at the end of Phase 2, and now, you know, there's still some growing pains here as we get into the meat of Phase 3.
I'm not concerned for them. I think they still have it in their wheelhouse to control their own destiny. I think they can still do extremely well, and on their day they can beat absolutely anybody. That's just the strength of this roster. That's the strength of this team. I wouldn't hit the panic button just yet, but if they continue to have weeks where they're not performing too well, I think now's the best time to have it, just before you then start that sort of world's grind.
Yeah.
But they would need to start trying to actually fix those little bits of issues. It could also be down to the fact that, you know, Genetics did have some of those personal issues a few weeks ago. They're still sort of going through the motions of getting back up to full tilt as a team with that. So again, no time to panic for the Kings. I think, you know, one loss isn't going to hurt them.
Adapting, I wanted to really get your thoughts on the sort of 1v1s that we saw in Game 2 there. Do you sort of relish when the game, at least there's like a metagame between the junglers where you're just trying to 1v1 each other and it doesn't really seem to be a huge part of the team fight or something like that? Or do you like to be sort of more cleaning up and more involved with the team?
So, I mean, if you have the winning 1v1, then it's good to try and find, like, if you can find the enemy jungler on their own, like, if they're trying to set up a flank or something and you know you win the 1v1, then, like, it's a good thing to look for, because you can start off the fight by just 1v1ing the jungler, and then, you know, you just have a numbers advantage for when the actual team fight breaks out. But, I don't know, like, they were kind of playing those 1v1s a bit rough, like, on both ends, and I'm not, like, Twig was being a bit reckless, I would say, and like where he was positioning, and then like Lasse would like capitalize on like maybe like Twig using all abilities on a wave, and like I think what Lasse was doing was good though, like trying to find Twig and get the 1v1, because he should win it if he plays it properly, and I'm not sure why Twig kind of kept letting it happen, or like didn't like position like closer to his team so that Lasse couldn't just like go on him. He was just kind of splitting up. But it can be a really good thing to do as well, just like split push or whatever, if you can win the 1v1 versus everyone basically, because you're just creating another pressure point on the map.
Yeah, it did seem kind of odd to try and take those 1v1s, especially on Humbats, who we think is sort of a much more teamfight oriented jungler for the most part, right?
Yeah, I mean, Humbats can also win a lot of 1v1s.
True.
He's good at that, but like, I just don't see the point against the Adachi, because you should lose that. And yeah, your ult is super influential. It's probably one of the best assassin ults in the game when it comes to team fights. Like, one good butt shot can win you the game.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is. So like, if you want to go for the 1v1, at least make sure you win it.
You know, I actually am curious, and you know, AJ or adapting, maybe you can speak to it, because this is something, you know, when the big 8.9 update came through, I interviewed Twig and kind of asked how his transition was, and he admittedly said he felt much more comfortable with the the Erlang Shens, the Osiris's. We still do see some Erlang, but kind of the warrior jungle meta. Still figuring things out here in the assassin meta. I think he's had games where he's looked great. Twig has on the assassins. Really, any of you guys, and you know, this is from your average Smite player. I am curious what that transition's really like. I mean, are you playing the game entirely differently when, you know, you're playing a Hun Bats versus like an Osiris, something like that? I mean, when Twig talks about getting used to the new meta, you know, I don't know if anyone has a great answer to it, but in your mind, what does that look like in the jungle? Is that like a whole gameplay shift?
Yeah, I would say it's a pretty big shift because it's not just the way you play like early game, but it's like everything about how you fight, because it's like an Osiris or Erlang or whatever. You can play a lot more like CC oriented, poke oriented. You're constantly trying to like poke, and you're not really like setting up flanks or whatever. And you can also engage a lot earlier because you're tanky, right? Or like with an Erlang, you're not necessarily tanky, but like you can CC a front line quite easily. Whereas with like assassins, you have to position quite different. That you want to be. Usually, you want to be going in later when things have been forced more. Whereas with warriors, you can be a bit more aggressive and like be the one forcing like jumps and stuff sometimes. And like it's a bit more like space. You're creating space versus capitalize on mistakes.
Sure. Yeah, I think moving forward, you talk about getting ready for Worlds, things like that. I think Twig again has shown assassins have been good for him. He did well in the warrior jungle meta. I think that's going to be the biggest thing I keep my eyes on moving over the next 2-3 weeks, group stages, things like that, is how much more comfortable Twig starts to get with the assassin-y style picks, because it's certainly not holding this team back, and I don't want that to be what this sounds like. But I think that if that's able to get more comfortable for him, this Kings team will definitely look scarier.
Chat, this is a bit of foreshadowing, as we'll talk about the Kings in the last set of the week as well, and I think Twig sort of popped off on a couple of assassins, so it's a good narrative technique there, Mr. Dolson.
Hey, that's right.
Any final thoughts about this set here, the Olympus Bolts versus the Camelot Kings?
Just a lot better from the Bolts, given they had like a small dip recently. I think this is the level we sort of expected from them to perform at, given where they placed last split, and it's a good time to start having that sort of rise back up to where you should be. So, looking really good for the Bolts from this set.
The next set of the week, I think this was the set of the week that Smite Pro sort of highlighted. The Atlantis Leviathans versus the Olympus Bolts. I think this might have been the best set of the weekend. A lot of sort of back and forth action, stealing fire giants. I think game one, the Bolts steal, or no, they don't steal a fire giant, but they sort of take a good fight near the FG and allow the Levi's to dive onto Ven, and Geb does Geb things afterwards, and Awesome Jake sort of seals the deal there. And game two, Levi's just sort of take the lead off some skirmishes and push it all the way to victory. And then game three was just an even game until the Zap Daddy shows up on Uller and kind of decides to pog off there a little bit. Were you guys expecting the Bolts to... I mean, the Bolts did play well, obviously, but I think the Levi's sort of have cemented themselves maybe at the top of the league off of this performance. Is that how you guys feel as well?
I would say the Leviathans, honestly, I thought they looked really good, but they made a lot of, obviously they made mistakes that cost them the game, but both game one and game two, they were running pretty hard, right? And at least I know there was one of them, and then they had a really bad throw at FG that cost them the game. But if they just play cleaner, they win for sure so easily.
EJ?
I'd say Leviathans certainly are looking like the strongest and probably the scariest team right now in the SPL. Maybe not through a case that they're playing with the least mistakes, but I think they're playing with the point where they just have the smallest windows where you could capitalize off of their mistakes. And the rest of the teams in the league, they aren't necessarily playing to their overall strengths. I don't think they're playing to the highest level that they can achieve to. I think some of the teams are kind of underperforming right now. And Leviathans are the ones that are just taking the most advantage of that at this point. And if you have an opportunity to try and be the top team in the league, even if it's just for a week or two, you try and take that, because then the onus is on everybody else to catch up to you, and that can put pressure on them to try and come with tactics to beat you. It can mean that teams try and copy your strategies. You can then try and set some metas yourself, and it can cascade from there just for being at the top for a week or two.
I think I'd sort of an interesting takeaway from this game in that the Leviathans have become and have been what feels like one of the hardest teams in the league to get to their back line. Their front line so aggressive by so much space, and Shinto and Zap are able to position properly and stay alive in these fights. That said, it feels like I don't know. Maybe there's just this aura about Zap and how his year started and how things are now. It felt like for a while, Zap would die or get dove on, whatever, early in the fight, and then Shinto was just the end of the fight. Shinto's still alive, takes things over. The last 2 games in this set felt a little bit different, where Shinto, didn't play bad by any means, but you get, 1, 3, and 2 on Merlin. Not a great mid lane KDA. That's a win, though. And then in game 3, get 1, 2, and 8 on the Raijin, so that's his pop-off performance. And in the meantime, Zap doesn't die at all in game 2, 403, so great performance from Zap. And then you mentioned the Uller in game 3, 613. That opened a lot of eyes. So I think what makes the Leviathans so scary to me right now, and there are other teams in the league that fit this bill as well, but for a while it felt like, well, we can keep Shinto alive at least. Zap can deal some damage, but he might die early in the fight. But as long as Shinto's alive, he's going to do Shinto things. It felt like we saw another fast, and that's still very much a way that this Leviathans team can play. But I saw games 2 and 3 a flip where, all right, even if Shinto isn't able to pop completely off in these fights, we still have a carry now that's playing comfortable and playing some of his best smite that can kind of fill that void a little bit later on. And Zapman just went absolutely wild. And if the front line is playing the way that they are, and you have both mid and ADC with the potential to carry a fight if one or the other dies early on, I think I agree with you guys that the Leviathans are maybe the scariest team right now, and sort of the without the slip ups, you're looking at a quicker set here, I think, against the Bolts, but definitely gave a lot of people confidence, I think, in voting on this team in matchups moving forward.
Yeah,
I wonder, and this is just speculation by me, if sort of the last 2 Worlds tournaments where Zap was, he played well, definitely in those tournaments, but he was a bit of a decoy maybe for a lot of those games, allowing
that's
Paul
a good word for
to
it.
get a lot of kills.
Yep.
I think people
that's one way of putting it.
I think people are just maybe catching up to it, and they're like, hey, maybe it's a trap to kill Zapman even if he is out of position sometimes.
Right. That's right.
And would you rather have? And I think they're trying to go on the mid laner to sort of counteract that trap. But I think that's the trap that Zap sets, right? Is either you go on me and my mid laner cleans up, or I still got the skills, and I think we've seen that, especially on the Uller recently. That's been something that he's really I think popped off on. So it's good to see that they're sort of evolving the Zap playstyle, so to speak.
Yeah, I'd say that in this might sound a little. Would I say this meta where you're having more aggressive junglers and assassins kind of favors Zapman more so than most other hunters, because he will almost want to be canked at times because he likes playing aggressive. He likes to try and take 1v1s. He likes to try and get some early kills on the board. Likes to try and dominate the lane early. He doesn't mind if the jungler comes over because he'll try and take that 2v1 at times just to try and get that kill, try and get ahead. And some of these hunters it does like playing, like the Uller, they benefited so well from these changes to jungler items. It just keeps on feeding into the fact that this is a meta that suits Zapman a lot. And that's just adding another layer to the scariness of the Leviathans, because they have a hunter who's really comfortable and probably is going to be the most comfortable hunter in the league right now in this meta.
Yeah, that's true. I did want to ask a little bit about the support builds. I think in every game this set, both the supports picked up the Benevolence and went into the Compassion. I know there are some really big nerfs. A lot of people building Watcher or Sentinels, the Boon and the Embrace, and liking all the protections. But we've kind of seen a bit of a reversion back to Benevolence here. Is there any reason for that you guys can think of, or what are these supports thinking maybe?
No clue. I'm gonna be honest.
Probably just trying to offset the sheer power of some of the assassins because of how burst heavy they are. Just trying to take even a little bit off them could mean the difference between your carry living and your carry dying.
You're talking mostly about Compassion there?
Yeah, that's like the only thing I can really think of, like off the top of my head right now. Otherwise, beats me.
I mean, they are all, I think, going into the compassion versus the animosity, but it's just something that stuck out to me that we've seen. I think a pretty big shift, I guess, in the middle of phase 2, where they just drop benevolence. Everybody dropped benevolence, right? Not just as supports. And it's kind of interesting to see it coming back now. So that is a good point you bring up. I like that. I think that's probably what they're doing it for, is compassion there, just to make sure the carries stay alive as much as possible.
Yeah, so I'm really sad that we didn't get to see teams build 5 compassions, because back when the season first launched, that was absolutely insane in team fights.
Yeah.
We tested it out, and we had 5 people diving fountain, and we literally sat in their fountain for a good 10 seconds before we even went down to red health bars. It was nuts just how much damage reduction you had by having 4 compassions around you.
That's interesting. Any final thoughts here about this set, the Atlantis Leviathans versus the Olympus Bolts?
Well, I was just impressed by Bolt's ability to like win fights from behind. I think that was good by them, and that's like really important for them going into like the tournaments, because I mean, if you can win from behind, then you have a shot at winning world. So
yeah, I think Cherry has been a big proponent of, it's good to be able to win when you're ahead, but what really matters, I think, especially in the regular season, is seeing how the team reacts to being behind and what they can do to sort of sneak a victory out of being behind, right?
Yeah.
And he's a really big proponent of sort of measuring teams on that metric rather than, the wins that they get. All right, the next set of the week here was the Jade Dragons versus the Solar Scarabs. Another 2-1 set here. Jade Dragons take game 1, and then I think, like always, the Scarabs somehow take game 2. That seems to be the way they win, is they just win game 2s, and finally the Dragons win game 3 off some strong play from the side lanes. I think I have to start by asking about the Bakasura here, because it's a little bit different and new for this team. The power Bakasura, I don't know, maybe Adapting, you have a good take on this? I know Scream sort of gave his ideas about that recently on the team check-in, or what Smite Pro had on Monday. But Adapting, what's your thoughts on the power Bakasura build that Scream has been going recently?
It's the most Scream thing I've ever seen. I saw it, I was like, there's no way this is gonna work. Surely they lose, but he played well. He worked. So like, props to him. I don't really know, like, what did he say was the reasoning for it? Because in my eyes, it shouldn't work. Like, Aaron Knight, I can see on Bakasura being good, just because your ult is really good, and so.
Well, his reasoning is that Butcher Blades goes on cooldown as soon as you use it. So if you have enough cooldown reduction, by the time the activation is over, it's only like 1 or 2 more seconds to reactivate it. And if you get a little bit of sort of, I guess, incidental attack speed, it sort of evens out where you can have the Butcher Blades up pretty often, and then it's just sort of Jotun's being a pretty good item, right, early on. So that was his explanation for it on the team check-in that you guys did earlier this week. So I don't know, it just seems like a pretty interesting tactic there to get both the best of the cooldown and the attack speed, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how much you really need like 2 resets of Butcher Blades, because usually whenever you go in on Bakasura, you're kind of like, you commit to like getting a kill whatever with your ult, and then like you do like a quick disengage. It's not like a quick in and out. But like you'll engage, get your kill or kills, and maybe like jump away and try and like heal up a bit before you go back in. So,
right.
But I mean, I don't know. Maybe it works. Maybe it's good. I haven't tried it myself. Did he go Hidden Blade? I saw he went Mannequins. Did he go like the Mannequin?
He went Mannequin Mace.
Yeah, he went the Mace.
Okay, well, that's interesting as well that he went for the Mannequins. Because you could just like went Boomba Spear and just like been like good at killing objectives, I guess. I don't know. Well, it worked, so good job.
it is hard to predict what Scream is going to be doing in these games. Any thoughts from you, Dolson or AJ, about this set?
Yeah, that's gonna be a back pocket pick. I don't think we're gonna be seeing a whole lot of Bakasura. I agree with Adapting though. It's a very Scream mindset. Seems like seems like, you know, the rest of the Scarabs, when we saw their matchup later on in the weekend, you know, they all have the potential to do really well in these games. But since adding Scream, it's felt like that's where the big shift has been for this team. And the Bakasura 6-3-4 performance there in Game 2, I think caters to that a little bit. For me, you know, I look at the games that Jade Dragons won, and they weren't really all that close. It was 15-4 in Game 1, 20-6 in Game 2. And again, it's nothing that I'm worried about for the Dragons. But you know, there's like the mental slip-ups here and there. You know, it's kind of a back and forth Game 2. One they probably feel like at points should have won. But it's flanked by 2 wins that I think make you not concerned about this team moving forward. Especially, you know, you look at Game 1, you pick some cheese. You get Zhangqi solo, Achilles support for PBM. Game 3, Kabrakan, Soul. You get the good old Gabba Wheelish combo. And so it's a team that when they play with their creativity and play around some of that early aggression, it kind of makes me not nervous about the Dragons whatsoever moving forward. Ullr, I think, still a big takeaway here. PandaCat had a couple great Ullr games. 4-0-4 in Game 1, 6-1-4 in Game 3. And so, of course, at the SPL level, I mean, all the Hunter players at the SPL level are going to be some of the best in the world at what they do. And so, in the grand scheme of Smite, you have confidence that they can all play Ullr. But from the last couple weeks, with the 8.9 update and the Mace Tree and everything, it feels like a couple of ADCs have really stood out on this Ullr pick, and PandaCat's one of them. And so, honestly, one of my takeaways is I think you start considering banning or picking Ullr away from PandaCat. I think he's going to do it to you if you give him the opportunity to. And it notched another couple wins here in this set. So I think one of my big takeaways as well is, you know, getting real specific at that point, but more data points that PandaCat's good at Ullr, and you need either game plan around it or pick or ban it away.
You guys feel like Ullr is ever going to be sort of like first pick, first ban worthy, or is it maybe a bit more niche than that, related to specific players?
No, I think right now a couple of teams are still trying to get to the point where they can confidently pick it as the first pick, but for the most part, I think Ullr is probably the strongest ADC right now with the way the builds are shifting. And yeah, it's just ridiculous how much damage he can output with the builds right now. He is definitely on the verge of needing a nerf, in my opinion.
Yeah, adapting. You don't like ganking a lane and getting one shot by an Ullr? You don't love that?
No. Never have. Never will. I think Ullr right now is definitely like worthy of first pick. I mean, maybe not every team is gonna be comfortable with that, and obviously it like depends on your picks and bans. But I think he's definitely the strongest hunter right now. Like, he just has so much damage, and he has lane control. He just has everything.
We're gonna see him in the jungle anytime soon, adapting. I know there are a lot of junglers who love to play the Ullr.
I would be fun to see some in SPL actually. That would be fun to see. I've been playing it in my ranked games. It's okay, but I don't think we'll be seeing it in SPL. But I would love to see that.
Yeah, I hope. Go ahead.
I want to see some Ullrs being flexed into the mid lane as well, considering how good his and strong his fight is in the early and mid game. Just whack him in the mid lane, start to put pressure out from on both sides of the map rather than just one.
I think that might happen. Wouldn't be surprised at least.
Yeah, I wouldn't be
feels
surprised.
like the mid lane crop in the SPL now doesn't really favor hunters in the mid lane, like except for Ven. I can't, and maybe Hurwind has played some hunters in the mid lane. I can't really think of a lot of mid laners who have, done that style. Right? Shinto doesn't really come to mind as a hunter player, or neither does Big Man too much. I mean, I think he did play on her and things like that back a couple seasons ago, but I don't know. Do you think it's, again, sort of player dependent on that? Ullr in the mid lane?
It would be player dependent. I do think Shinto could play it though, because I remember him playing it a lot in scrims against us last year. He was always farming us with that. He was insane. But I think it would be player dependent more, yeah. Like any mid laners who are comfortable playing him and like feel like they're actually really good at him rather than like just forcing that pick into mid when it's already so good ADC. Because if your mid laner is not comfortable on it, just put him on a strong mage instead, you know. Rage in TM or whatever, and then just have that already ADC.
Any final thoughts here about this set? You guys maybe want to see more from the Scarabs, or is this a good gauge of their improvement so far?
Yeah, I don't know. The Scarabs are allergic to 2-game sets. We're losing them, it feels like, at this point. I mean, what, they lost to the Oni Warriors 2-0. They've gone to 3. Yeah, you know, I think, I guess we'll literally talk about the Scarabs here in a second again. Up to this matchup, and I want to preface it because my tone's going to change when we talk about the next one. Up to this matchup, I was thinking the Scarabs have improved. Every single team they've gone to 3 games with or is a top team. They've shown that they can compete, and these wins have just slipped away. They've made mistakes that have lost them these sets, and on any given day, you know, they might be 3-1 at this point if they're able to take these games. So I up to this set, I was thinking still rough around the edges, but a team that it looks like in, you know, come tournament time could make a run. You know, you're taking these very, very, very good teams to 3 games, and you're self-admittedly letting some of the wins slip away from you. It was their point of view on it. And I felt the same. I felt like they were a good team that made some self-inflicted mistakes that cost them these sets. But I think their next set looked a little bit different, in my opinion.
AJ adapting, any final thoughts?
I like some of the ideas that we saw out of the Scarabs in game 1 in particular. We saw Inbound playing Capri with a meditation as well as a frenzy, and then in game number 2, obviously they did the cooldown Bakasura with mannequins. Game number 3, they even went into a sort of ability-based Nemesis build. I like some of the theory crafting that's coming out of them. And just begs me the question, if they're presenting this sort of thing to us, what else are they working on behind the scenes? I want to see some more of what... I want to see some more jank from them. I want to see what else they've been working on and maybe spring some teams by surprise.
Okay. I think we can... you know, from what I remember hearing from the team check-in, I think we're probably going to see some spice from the Solar Scarabs, more than some other teams. All right, let's move on to the next set of the week here. The Solar Scarabs are going up against the Valhalla Valkyries in this one. And, like always, the Scarabs take it to 3 games. I think we really got to talk about the Valks looking pretty good in game 1 here. Able to sort of play some interesting things. You know, we see zeros on the Chang'e, which is not a mid laner I think we've seen in Season 8 at all. And, you know, Ducky sort of had a great game in the solo lane there, and they're actually able to win game 1 here. Do you guys, you know, like these sorts of picks? I think zeros on Chang'e is something we've seen, you know, in the past. It's one of his sort of pet gods, so to speak. Is there some good things to come from this game 1 win?
I think the picks that they did pick, apart from maybe the dual lane of Sobek and Honor, they do well from ping, because they've got nice big wide abilities, quite a few AoEs in there as well. So you're sort of mitigating some of the negatives that you are by playing from Europe on their set. And maybe that's what they do have to try and do, is try and play more of these easier to play, less mechanically inclined gods. Just up until they're back on level pegging with some of the other teams in the league, until they've come over for the lands, then it can start to really flex and show the god pools that we know that they have, and you know take teams by surprise again. And I think I do want to see a bit more Chang'e from Zeros. I think it did quite well on it. I think it synergizes well for the team style that they want to play in, which is they all want to be very aggressive together. They want to fight as a 5-man in the front line and then 5-man in the back line as well. They don't want to split up these fights. They want to play as a unit. And that's what Chang'e can do. That's what the Odin forces them to do as well. So more of those picks that just solidifies the team fights and condenses it into one ball will help the Valkyries a fair bit.
Captain Dolson, your thoughts on the game 1 win here from the Valks?
Well, I thought it was good. I mean, like, it was a bit rough at points. I think at like the start of the game, like Zeros was missing a few ults here and there, but as the game went on, he ended up getting some really big engages, and then which is set up like one fight he got like a double or triple jungle ult on the back line.
Yeah.
And basically did like 1.3k to both of them by itself. So like they just insta won the fight. And I mean, I do think they should play stuff that is more easy to execute, and preferably they should just play things that are good at diving together, because I think it's a lot easier to dive. As all you have to do is get a good engage and then you just follow up with each other, you know, and like John is a very good flanker, so like if you get a good engage for him where he can capitalize on people like using their escapes or relics, then usually he would be very good at punishing that. But yeah, no, game one I was happy they managed to win it, especially with Scarabs having looked better.
Yeah.
So.
Dolson, how about you?
Yeah, this was a good one. Ducky, and Johnny. I mean, of course, stood out to me in this one. Really, Ducky though. Yeah, I talked to him in the pregame interview. You know, of course, no one on this team is thrilled with the way that their year has gone. Of course, kind of things out of everyone's control have definitely negatively impacted this team. And I asked him about the Odin and those types of picks and how the meta looks to him at the moment. You could tell he was a little frustrated. He was like, look, I want to be able to play these, you know, the solo laners right now that everyone is playing. You know, Odin just feels really bad from ping. And then they pick it, and I was like, all right, so this is going to be a pretty interesting look at this pick. And it looked great. I mean, he did, I think, second to highest damage in the game, third to highest, something like that. Especially up against SOT, who recently has been playing very well. Sot has, what feels like, been attempting to solo every solo laner in the league over the last couple weeks, and Ducky stood up not only in the laning phase, but throughout the team fights and all that later in the game. So at least in game one, I loved what I saw out of Ducky, because that's what this team needs. You talk about the way that they want a team fight, and Ducky on picks like this is going to make that a lot easier. So Ducky, and then, you know, of course, Johnny and the rest of the boys. You know, they look good in game one, and it makes you happy to see after what's been a tough year.
Yeah, and obviously for game two, right, the Scarabs have to win game two, and they sort of win, I think, in a similar fashion, going basically through solo and jungle and kind of camping Ducky a little bit in game two. Kind of seems like, you know, these lower end teams are able to find a path to victory through the solo lane a lot, and sometimes it doesn't even matter who they're playing, right? Like we see the Scarabs take games off of like Dragons and things like that through sort of solo lane pressure, or, you know, the jungle and the solo running the right side of the map, so to speak. Is that a good sort of strategy to try and get some wins? I feel like we see a lot of maybe some of the lower end teams try to do that.
I'd say it's not an easy way to win a game, but if you have a fed solo laner that's just running around the map, they are practically unstoppable, because they are tanky, they are doing some quite high damage as well. They just have the best of both worlds because of the build paths that they go down. So if you're able to get your solo laner ahead, you can then control the mid game very easily by rotating them, and that's sometimes all you need to then be able to secure the first fire giant and then go through and take some towers and some phoenixes.
Dolson, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No. Actually, your question was pretty spot on, and sort of segues into my point. We didn't actually really talk about them during the Jade Dragons set for the Scarabs just previous to this, but SOT soloed Fine OK at one point.
That's true.
And so if, you know, we're in a meta where some teams are starting to form their own meta around getting your solo laner ahead. Sot is maybe one of the guys that I want to have that lead, to be able to play like that. Game one wasn't his best. Game two looked really good from SOT at a 9-2-9 Cerberus in that game. And so I think in this set, and maybe even the Scarabs weekend in general, even though they split their sets, I think SOT has really started to play well. And that, you know, that's scary for future teams to have to go up against, especially if, you know, what you brought up, where you're starting to camp solo lane a little bit. You know, Ducky just kind of did it to you in game one. We need to shut him down in game two. and that gets Scream ahead on the Hun Bats. I think that's absolutely an avenue for this Scarabs team to continue to find wins. Kasat, for my money, I mean, clearly there's a lot of games we watch, but I can't remember a time where just kind of passively in lane he's been like super far behind outside of like a jungler throwing a lot of pressure his direction. So I think, maybe more often than not, we'll start to see Sat's lanes gankable and pressurable. And I think that's a direction that the Scarabs team can find some wins moving forward.
Yeah. Adapting, you're the jungler here on the panel. Is that something you like to do? Go and gank the solo lane, try and get solo ahead?
I mean, for sure. Not just solo, right? I mean, it depends. But like, if you have someone who's playing an aggressive solo laner and someone who actually like wants to use that pressure, the best thing you can do is try to play for that and try and get them ahead. And I think when it's working really well. And I think it's something they should keep doing. And it's just having these kind of basic game plans to make the game easier in general.
Yeah.
They should recognize that is one of their strengths, and then they just have to like try and build on that. But I think it's really good.
So moving on finally to game 3, which is unfortunately a bit of a tragedy if you're a Valks fan.
Yeah.
I think they start out 10-0. Really strong early game. I think they were able to even take some Gold Furies and things like that. And I think it's something we've seen before where the late game team fight situation rolls around, 20, 25, 28 minutes in, and the Valks are just not able to compete, unfortunately. I think, though, like, you have to feel really good about the Valks, especially in this set, especially the way that they were able to control, most of the game, especially game 1 and game 2, right?
I think this is one of those weird ones where if you're the Valkyries, clearly you're devastated you didn't get to win. You had a 10-kill, 8,000 gold lead, if I'm remembering right. Sot steals Fire Giant with like his Pridwin proc or something. Like something absurd like that. And if that doesn't happen, you're winning this game for sure.
Yeah.
And so like a thin margin like that, I have to imagine a player's not happy that you're losing. But like from a fan perspective, from a caster, from a viewer perspective, you're thinking, all right, the Valkyries at least looked good in this set. They gave themselves a chance to win, which we haven't seen on a consistent basis from this team. I think on the flip side, and the Scarabs themselves have admitted this on Twitter, look, they get the win, but that's it, right? I mean, this game 3, they are not happy about it. It doesn't look good. You go down big early. I mean, this is a game that the Scarabs probably should have lost. They put themselves in a position to win, stealing away Fire Giant. You make the right moves to get yourself back in the game. So credit is due there. But yeah, and this is heartbreaking for the Valkyries. Would have been great to get a win here. You're feeling good. I think if you're a fan of theirs or even a player, you say, look, we can do this. We can beat these teams. I think this is one, the Scarabs, they're just happy to get a win and get out of there, right? Yeah. I mean, all eyes on their next matchup. Because I hesitate to call this a must-win, or needed to be a must-win, but I think it was damn near close to it for this Scarabs team, because all the talk has been, we go against these top teams, we take them to 3 games, and we made a mistake. It was our game to win, and then we lost. And not to mince word, but you're going up against the Valkyries team that hasn't won a game since mid-phase 2. Not a set, but a game. They've won a game since the middle of the second phase. You have to win the set at least if you're the Scarabs, and you're talking about your team the way you have been. And they did, and all credit is due there. They came real close to not winning this set. But I think it'll be a wake-up call. This team has really grown recently. And so I think they're happy to get the win, but they're the type of team now, I think, that has the right attitude towards self-reflection, and they won't be happy with the way that they got there.
Yeah. AJ, adapting your thoughts on this game 3?
Not really. I think Dolson pretty much said everything that needed to be said about this game and this set as a whole. It is unfortunate for the Valks, and it is good that they've shown like these signs. I know that they're kind of rooted right now to the bottom of like the SPL standings, but if they could show these signs against, and no disrespect to the Solar Scarabs at all, but if they could show these signs of life against a team that's not the Solar Scarabs, that to me will show a lot more progress than this set will have shown tenfold.
Good point there. Adapting, any thoughts on this game 3 here from the Valks and the Scarabs?
No, I think everything's kind of been said. It's just it's kind of a win for Valks, but it's also not. But at least they put up a show, and they really could have won, genuinely. And then for Scarabs, I mean, they're just not gonna feel good after that. But yeah, it's good for them as well to realize that like they can't let down even against this kind of, well, what is the bottom team right now.
Right. Yeah.
And that's really important, not to play down to your competition ever. You should never play down. You should be the standard of your own team, and then you play up if anything.
All right, let's move on to the last set of the week here. The Camelot Kings versus the Oni Warriors. And this one, it was a pretty long game 1 here. You know, a lot of, I think, sort of Fire Giant steals is sort of the theme of this set, right? You know, the Kings start off real strong in game 1. Oni Warriors need to take some risk, take a risky Fire Giant. And Big Man Things does, you know, big man things, as we like to say. Steals the FG, and the Kings are able to close out game 1 from that. Game 2, obviously, is a bit closer of a set. The Onis are the ones to steal Fire Giant in this one, but unfortunately, they cannot close out the game here, and the Kings end up with a 2-0. Interesting about this, I think both games ended up 20-13 for the Kings in terms of kills here. And in game 2, Captain Twig really kind of popped off on the Loki, as we mentioned a little bit earlier in the show, doing some big damage stuff here on the Assassins. What are you guys' thoughts on this final set of the week?
I'll zoom way out on this. I casted this with aggro. This was like a lot of fun to watch. This is one of those sets. I mean, it felt like there was a little bit of everything in both of these games. There were steals, multi kills, back and forth, and so at its core, zoomed way out. This was just fun to watch. I think continued. I don't know. Confidence is not the right word. You know, the Oni Warriors have been kind of this enigma of a team where I truly don't know what team we're going to get on any given day. You know, the type of team that'll get blown out of the water, or they're taking, the top teams to 3 games, sneak a win every once in a while.
That's just what you get with the fraud mob, okay?
That's right. That's right. That's what you get with Neil. But they've shown, especially over the last couple of weeks, and the start of Phase 3 into where we are now, they've shown that even in their losses, that they can compete with these top teams. So my Oni Warrior specific takeaway is that in games that they were down big, they gave themselves chances to win. They pushed a game to 45 minutes, and then get close to 40 minutes in game 2. And I've always said the league is just better for it when every single team can compete with every other team. And the Oni Warriors are a pivotal piece of that puzzle. And they were able to put on a good show up against the Camelot Kings. So I'm glad you bring up Twig. I think he was sort of my takeaway on the King side of things, where we did get a great assassin performance from Twig. And wouldn't you know it, the Camelot Kings looked real scary there in game 2.
Yeah.
So I like the brand of Smite they're playing when Captain Twig is playing well.
AJ adapting, any thoughts here on the whole?
Well, I was happy with how, like for Oni Warriors, I feel like for them to have probably not been in a good position for most of the year. I feel like they've steadily been looking better at least. I thought both was looking pretty clean on the other. But I mean the games were fun at least, and I think both teams put on a good show. So
You're a satisfied fan?
I was just good watch. Thanks for that, I guess.
AJ, how about you? What are your thoughts?
I thought it was interesting for the Kings to showcase a different strategy as well, which was to play the Discordia in the mid lane, a god that's not really been that highly contested or highly put into the meta. I think it's quite a smart pickup. If you're going to be playing these high damage junglers, why not just give them more damage, and why not just let them blow up the ADCs and the backliners even faster? especially if you have somebody explosive in the jungle like Captain Twig, when he's playing a god like Susanoo in game number 1, or in game number 2 when he's playing the Loki, and you're going full damage on both of them. Just allowing him more control over the backline through this extra damage can, it does add an extra level of thinking to their team comps and the way them. They really have just gone away and thought, these are the gods that we want to pick with, these are the gods we want to play with, and these are the reasons why we want to have them. And it's shown that Smite has developed more so from we're picking these gods because they seem good together to these specific interactions are what we want.
Yeah, I think that Discordia is pretty great that you mentioned that. The passive, I think, is a little bit underrated for Discordia. We talk about the Strife and the Apple and all those things. I think the passive, like you said, if it's going to be sort of a bit of a burst meta, just do better burst, right?
We saw Jean Kui for Dardes in this set too. I almost forgot about that. When I say it has everything. Actually, he put up like a soft quad. He got 3 and then a delayed 4th in one of those base defense. That's right, because he was 1 in 4 prior to that fight, and then he puts up 4 kills and made his KDA look a whole lot better in one swing. I'm also curious how the Oni Warriors are going to draft for Neilma moving forward. He's looked great when we've seen him on the Kuzumbo style picks, like where you just kind of walk into their team and Watery Grave and you're wreaking chaos and you're sowing the chaos in the backline. And then we saw him in game 1 on like a totally opposite pick, like the Sylvanas, and he goes 1 and 8. And so I'm curious what and that's that's uncharacteristic. I think you replay game 1 a million times, and I don't know. I doubt 1 and 8 happens all that often, but not surprised maybe given the way Neil has played well on the Kuzumbo style walk into the backline picks that we saw a bit of a sluggish game 1 from him. And so I think picks and bans wise, this team has showed that they're more comfortable giving Dardes the Hera, giving him sort of his eclectic picks, and he looks better on those. And now my eyes shift to Neil. That's going to be kind of my self storyline to take some notes on here is how the team drafts around Neilma, because we saw great things from Kuzumbo in those kind of run it down style picks, and then a little shaky from Neil, at least in game 1. Looked a little better on Terra in game 2. But look, I mean, if you're going to be able to give him like Kuzumbo, I wouldn't be surprised if they do it every chance they get, because it was a totally different style of Neil. But that's one of my other Oni Warriors takeaways, I think.
Sure. This week, I was able to sit down with PolarbearMike, the support for the Jade Dragons, to talk a little bit about Phase 2 and Phase 3, and then look forward to Worlds as well. Check it out. Hey guys, I'm here with PolarbearMike, the support for the Jade Dragons, to talk a little bit about Phase 2, Phase 3, and then look ahead to Worlds a little bit as well. So Mike, I wanted to start with Phase 2, and Phase 2 I think was where we saw a pretty big set of roster changes, with Julio getting kicked and with the whole layer situation and, Zap moving. There's a lot of sort of moving pieces amongst the Pro League. And I know you guys didn't have any roster changes, but, what were your thoughts on the roster changes initially? And, have those expectations maybe been met? And do you think there was any effect that these roster changes had on the Dragons at all? Maybe in Phase 2 or even post Phase 2 at all?
I don't think they've had any impact on us. I did expect that. I thought the Titans would get a lot better with a different jungle, with all due respect to Scary, but, just like swapping a jungle is really hard. So I thought having somebody who had actually had a lot of experience and practice in that role would help that team a lot. I didn't necessarily think it would mean that they would shoot straight up to winning the tournament, but they definitely looked really good with that. So that kind of went as expected. Excuse me. And then same thing for Zap going to the Leviathans. I thought that the team would kind of just play a lot. I think that they would just do a little bit better in tournament settings, just having a little bit more of a calmer presence, whether that is necessarily from Steve actually calling the game and making a big impact with his voice. I think just the the presence of somebody where like you can go down 0-1 or 0-2 in a set or whatever, mainly 0-1, you know, and just like some people will have like jitters or some nerves right away, but just to be able to calm that and get that like monkey off their back, so to speak, because they've struggled in their tournament since, you know, they've been in the SPL, I thought that would help them a lot as well.
Yeah, one thing I think we sort of forget pretty easily is sort of how new these players are to the SPL. Like last year was really their first sort
Yeah,
of rookie year. So, you know, it is just very impressive how well they've adjusted to it, I think. And, you know, you can't, I think it's hard to expect them to sort of win in these tournaments being so new,
for
right?
sure.
Like, I
Yeah,
think even for you, for a lot of players, especially in NA, you know, it took some time. I think even in EU, it took some time to, you know, get, for players to get their footing, especially in this league, because SPL is sort of a completely different beast. You know, the other thing about roster apocalypse, I think, in the middle of the year this year is it was, you know, a lot, right? Does that, you know, was that something that you were concerned about with so many players switching things up? Is that something that, you know, you thought made any difference to the league at all, or did you expect there to be maybe like a quality drop because there were so many new faces on new teams at all, or you know, is
uh
that something that was a concern to you?
no, normally I think there should be I normally think if anything there ends up being a quality increase. It depends on the reason, of course.
Hmm.
Like, you know, for example, the like Julio getting banned, that's not necessarily a scenario where like a guaranteed like better player is
Right.
taking his place. Like that's him just like, you know, messing up.
Hmm.
It happened to be that, you know, with all the swaps that have happened and, you know, role swaps, whatever, that there are, you know, good players in those roles. But like for example, if a support player got banned, I think the support role in general is like pretty thin. I don't think there's a ton of like talent that people are reaching for. Not to say that there can't be soon, but
Hmm.
just right now, I don't think there's like an obvious answer you go
Right.
to right
Right.
away. So I think it just depended on the role. But normally, I think if you've been around for a long time, you expect there to be changes like
Hmm.
mid year, especially if you're a team that's not feeling like you're consistently challenging the top end. You're going to naturally look for a change to help propel you there. And,
Hmm.
you know, often that ends up being a roster change.
Right.
So the volume of them didn't really surprise me. And normally I expect them to, whether it's temporary or not, at the very least, most teams will go through like a honeymoon phase when they first have a
Hmm.
roster change. So, yeah, I think for the most part, it's. I wouldn't have guessed the exact changes, right?
Hmm.
But I definitely would have anticipated there being changes for sure.
Sure. Sure. I do want to maybe focus in on the Jade Dragons a little bit during phase two. You know, I looked at the standings for phase two and I was a bit surprised. I had to sort of take a double take when I saw that you guys were 8-6 because I think, you know, maybe I think there are a lot of fan expectations for you guys just to sort of be at the top of the leaderboard, you know, sort of every single split. But you know, it was a bit of a weaker phase two for you guys. Was that just because, you know, there were quite a bit of moving parts? I know Panda was moving down to Atlanta and things like that. What were maybe some of the reasons that, you know, that you guys felt maybe had a bit of a weaker phase two?
Well, I think one of our losses was like the end of the split to like the Titans.
Right,
It was like
right,
the
sure.
troll set. So like we had like 5 legitimate losses in there.
Hmm.
Which definitely is not what we necessarily expect to have, of course, but I think for the most part we were mainly just not in agreement with the way we saw the game and what we wanted to do, and we were testing a lot of things. I think
Hmm.
from like, you know, phase one we ended up, I think we were second in the regular split and then won our group, and then actually we didn't win our group. I think we were tied or whatever. The
Right.
Warriors ended up winning it, but we ended up winning the tournament. And I think from there was just like frustration with maybe just the way the game felt for certain
Mm.
people's like roles, not necessarily like just meta, but just like how we were playing as a team and how it impacted roles and like what style we wanted to play, and figuring out like, you know, how we adjust wanted to adjust our gameplay, our styles, what like role each person is filling on the team is still something that we have to constantly figure out with,
Hmm.
you know, Herwin, and figure out how to like utilize our roster in the right way. And I think, you know, we're getting closer to that. I don't even know if we're perfect on that yet, but we're definitely like pushing towards that still. So I think phase two was a lot of ended up being a lot of an experimental phase
Hmm.
for us. And then we get to the point where at the tournament, that was actually the most confident I felt all year, funnily enough, going into that tournament.
Hmm.
The week of practice leading up to that, I actually felt more confident than I had the rest of the year, just in how we were playing and how we figured stuff out. it just happened we just didn't play the greatest on the day against the Titans, and I
Right.
think, had we won that set, maybe things would be looking different.
Sure, yeah.
Because
Well,
I was definitely very confident going
Mhm.
into the Kings. If we did get to the Kings, I was very, very confident with how our matchup would play out with them. Because basically, as soon as the Titans beat us, we thought that they would beat the Kings as well, just for meta reasons. But yeah, the Titans just played better than us that day. So I think the regular split was very frustrating for me. But even though we lost first round of the tournament, to me that was still a high note in terms of how I felt about how we were actually playing the game. And I don't mind having, you're going to have sets where you don't perform your best. I'd rather have it be then while we're figuring stuff out than, at Worlds or whatever.
Sure. Do you feel maybe there were, your weaknesses sort of came to bear as a team, or do you function, or do you sort of credit maybe the phase being lackluster with more, meta problems or just your experimentation?
It depends. Like, I think meta can be a pretty easy, like, cop out for people. I think, saying, like, oh, I just don't like this meta or this meta doesn't suit me. I think a lot of times it's just, I don't want to call it laziness, but I think more often than not, like, people having frustration with the way their role is in the meta makes sense to make you kind of lose, like, a little bit of, I guess, like, joy or excitement for the game. And I think that's more what ends up happening is I think last phase we had a lot of burnout, just like mental burnout and stuff from phase one carrying over because like I'll use my role as an example. I'm playing the same characters every game in scrims. I'm playing the same characters in the SPL. There's really not a lot of changes that are making my role feel different than it did, 4 or 5 months ago. So because of that, you just kind of get in the cycle where you just kind of feel burnt, you feel kind of stagnant, you aren't as driven to play the game outside scrims a lot. And I think it actually, for my role at least, it got worse with the boots change because you see the boots change and you're like, oh, no boots. Now, like, maybe the game will feel a lot different. What ended up happening is I was still playing the same characters, which I think was kind of a bummer. Like, I think for other roles, it changed pretty significantly, like the ADC God Pool. And I think for solo lane, it made a pretty huge impact.
Right.
But for support, it was kind of like, I'm still playing Yamoja every game. I'm still playing, like, Ymir was very relevant. It's just the same old characters. And I think now at the start of phase 3, there have been pretty, like, impactful support changes. The relic buffs are the biggest one that I can think of, and then obviously Geb got a pretty big buff. And whenever a character like that comes in, he has his own set of counters and characters that he'll bring in along with him. So it feels a lot fresher to me, at least. I think that of course Jungle has had a bit of a resurgence in like their god pool and stuff like that. But yeah, I think people just got bored of Yamoja and Raijin and mannequins Erlang and Osiris for 7 months.
Yeah.
And I think particularly we did not enjoy that much. And what we want to work on as a team for the long term and what that meta forced you to do were two completely opposite things. So it felt very frustrating to play the game because what we want to improve on as a team kind of contradicted what would make us win in the short term. And we basically just, not that we weren't trying to win, but winning regular season games is not it's not the number one priority on our list.
Right. Do you feel that maybe having the full-on double round robin maybe led to a little more burnout than having what we're having in phase 3 and phase 1, where there's this like, shorter, I guess one round robin instead of a double round robin, and then this group stage? Does that maybe break up the phase a little bit so that it's easier to digest at all, or is this just how Smite is? You got to roll with the punches a little bit.
Maybe I think definitely you have to roll with the punches, especially if you're an experienced player. For me, I prefer the current group stage format to the initial one, only because the sets are now best of 5 in the group. And best of 5s are what I want to be playing. I don't really get super excited for best of 3s. I don't find them very engaging from like a strategical standpoint. So I prefer to be in an environment where you're playing a lot of best of 5. So I would take this split over the prior two. I'm more excited for it. And I think it just makes it feel a little bit more impactful in terms of like fairness. If you're trying to seed a tournament, I think having a double round robin is probably a better way to seed it. But I think it's a lot less exciting. I think it becomes very I think it becomes pretty like repetitive just for not necessarily for like the games themselves, but just like how you are as a player. You know, you kind of just approach things the same way. Whereas I think if you see like a group stage and a best of 5 and you have 3 unique opponents, how you draft might change completely.
Right.
Whereas if I'm playing 14 best of 3 sets in a regular season and each one of them is weighed the same amount, right? Where like the group stage, winning a group stage set is way more important than winning a round robin set right now. You pretty much approach it the same way. You approach it from like a meta standpoint of just the drafts are very like straightforward. They're not very inventive throughout a set. So yeah, I think that's the main differences, and I definitely prefer the best of 5 group stage for sure.
Sure. You know, I talked to some of your teammates, especially like Final K was pretty big on sort of, you know, saving the best Smite gameplay for Worlds and, you know, trying to peak at the right time. And I think this sort of goes along with what you said is that, you know, you don't really worry too much about the regular season games, really focused on Worlds and winning the championship. Does it ever feel like that mentality backfires a little bit, especially sort of considering, you know, what happened in phase 2, or is that just something that is part of that process as well, you know, where you have to maybe put away those games or forget them, so to speak, and just move on from it?
You know, I think that's part of like the I personally don't share that philosophy. So, you know, I'm always of the opinion that the best way to improve is to try your best to win at all times, no matter what the meta is, no matter what the circumstances. Like my personal opinion, not like a team consensus.
Right.
Would be that I want to play whatever I think is the best every single game, and I want to push myself to learn that way, because by doing that, you'll figure things out. Like eventually, you kind of get deeper rooted into what's good, why it's working, how you can like break that down and pick it apart and find counters to it, different styles, whatever. That's personally how I normally choose to address things, but that same thing is the reason that makes me feel like burnt out from playing the same characters every game, right? Where I'm fine to do that. I like that style and I prefer to practice that way and prepare that way and play that way in the SPL. But normally in the past in my career, that's accompanied by every 2 to 3 months, there's a couple new characters that get buffed, get nerfed, things move around. This year, the way the patch cycles have worked out, that really hasn't been the case. So, you know, if Alec, for example, is saying that he wants to save his best Smite for Worlds or whatever, to me, that's, I think, his way of preserving his, like, burnout from the game, you know, where if he feels like it's stagnant in his role and he's not enjoying it as much, I feel like that's just a way of expressing, like, his drive just isn't as high as it could be because he's not feeling pushed, basically. And it's hard to, like, push himself because he knows he's going to burn himself out. So I think, you know, when you come to a team, even if, you know, you don't see eye to eye on that, I think the most important thing is just finding some sort of compromise. So for me, it was, I don't mind the regular season as much, but going into the tournament, I want to really like nail things down. And like I said, that week of practice, we definitely did. And I felt like things were, you know, exactly where we wanted them, but, you know, we didn't play great on that day, and that's just, you know, how it goes. So it just depends. It's all a balancing game. I think anyone who's been around for a long time, you just kind of have to trust them to know how to manage their own schedule, manage their own burnout, and, you know, take that type of stuff seriously.
Yeah, I think we sort of focus on burnout a lot in Smite, but truly it's a thing that I think pretty much any professional has to deal with, right? You know, especially if you're, you know, putting your time in at your job, right? Like some months are just going to feel crappy and some months are not. So
yeah, 100%.
You know, I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to for sure. You know, we did talk a little bit about phase 3 and sort of metas changing, and I wanted to maybe hone in on that a little bit more, talk specifically about the support role. We've seen some of these more backline oriented, maybe peel oriented supports sort of become the hot stuff recently. I'm thinking like the Capris and you know, things like that we've seen a lot of teams maybe prioritizing in picks and bans recently. I I don't want to pry too much, obviously, but are you feeling sort of the same way that these more peel oriented supports are helping out? Or I know you love playing aggressively. Is there still ways to be aggressive in this meta from the support role?
Yes and no. So it kind of depends on characters a little bit. So using a character like Geb as an
Hmm.
example, right? Like Geb will do a ton of damage, and you can dive with Geb. Like if you really wanted to, you could like just look for big like blink outs and get on their back line and play the game that way. Um, but I think a large reason you're seeing the shift the way you are is because the ability for so like last year, for example, the support can kind of dictate the tempo of the game. It's
Hmm.
really easy to set up advantages in your lane, invade off of it. You have more aggressive options via like relics when like Thorns was meta, for example. So your ability to push the tempo really fast and then make the game really difficult for carries was extremely high, probably too high, which is why it was nerfed.
Hmm.
Um, whereas this year, the curve of the damage dealers versus the tanks in especially like the mid to late game, it just way favors the damage dealers. So your
Hmm.
ability to dive them is not really as impactful. Not that you can't dive and like set up a fight, but like I'm not going to solo a backliner. I could literally
Right.
solo somebody last year like very easily.
Yeah.
You don't really see that as
Hmm.
much. So, you kind of see what's meta, like Geb, for example. Geb, what he does really well is he makes the enemy jungler feel like crap.
Hmm.
And you see a lot of jungle buffs, right? So if you have a character like Geb get buffed and you have junglers get buffed, it kind of feeds exactly into what he wants to do. It's very similar to like, Uller is a very common complaint from people right now because you see all of his items get buffed
Right.
and the god gets buffed. So the two of those together make him very high value in a draft. Same thing with Geb. All the junglers that he does well into get buffed by those item changes. And then he also gets buffed himself. So he's going to be extremely high value. And then off of that, you'll see, Sylvanas has a good matchup in a Geb historically. That'd be one of
Hmm.
the picks that you would pick into a Geb
Hmm.
because he does very well in the lane and, just whatever throughout that matchup. So you see Sylvanas come back into the meta. Well, he also got buffed and,
Right.
all of that. So I think it's just kind of the combination of a few changes along with jungle really changing the game a lot for every role. There still are aggressive counter options into all of those picks that you can play and that people have played a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it really just depends on the team. And I think for a lot of players, they feel like it's more consistent to be able to play with your backline than it is to kind of like get into theirs and dive and do whatever else. It feels like the risk reward just favors you playing with your backline a little bit more, especially with the relic changes. That's another thing I didn't even mention, but like shell and sprint and meditation, all of these relics got pretty huge buffs. So as a result of that, it's just going to favor that playstyle even more.
Yeah. I don't know. It seems kind of odd to me that we're not going sort of into worlds without a or with a dive meta. It feels like the past couple years, as we've headed into worlds, a lot of teams have gone into the dive meta, and I think it's a little bit surprising to see that supports are playing a little more peel oriented right now. But hey, there's still a lot of time before worlds happens, right? There's still phase 3 playoffs and all sorts of other things to go on before we actually
Yeah,
get to
it'll just constantly evolve. Like
yeah.
you'll have, if this meta, theoretically, if one team plays the same way right now as they do at Worlds, it'll be very easy to have a draft to, pick that apart and have a
Sure.
draft that at the end of the day you have to kill the carries and your
Hmm.
carries need to live. That's how you win the game.
Hmm.
Like their EDC and mage need to die and yours need to live, and that's how you can like do objectives, push your lead, win the game, all that. So people will figure it out. It might just take time. It might take certain tweaks, patches, whatever. But yeah, it's something I expect everybody to be constantly like searching for answers for.
Yeah, and it does seem like a bit of an iterative process, right? Between sort of the teams in the league. Like you said, someone picks up Gab, and then someone's like, oh, Sylvanas is good into that, and then, it evolves from that, right?
Yeah. Well, it depends on people's god pools as well, right?
Sure.
That's where like you take like I think I had something I had thought about is like a player like say me or Roar who has been around for a very long time. We've kind of played through all of these metas, so we
Hmm.
remember all these matchups and what picks we liked into it. Whereas you see somebody like Jake, Jake's never played in a meta where Khepri and Sylvanas and Geb are the Guardians. He's never played that before.
Hmm.
He doesn't,
Hmm.
and he'll have his picks that he'll figure out that he likes into it and something that he'll bring from his perspective. But for me and Aurora, it's very easy where like we may see a Geb locked in, and we might think like, oh, I like to play X, Y, and Z into this, and I might have 3 completely separate picks that all do, their own thing, and that type of thought process is kind of how the meta gets pushed, because you see that teams will have different answers to the same thing, and then you kind of get to evaluate what you actually think is the best answer, and then go off of that.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing to think about and strategize about, I think, and I'm sure a lot of players are doing that as we were speaking now. So that's good to see. Last thing I wanted to talk about here before we get into Worlds is, there being quite a bit of a logjam sort of at the top of the table now. It looks like pretty conceivably that there could be 5 or maybe even 6 sort of teams vying for that top spot. I know there are still 2 more weeks of round robin play to go through, and then a whole set of group stages. But you sort of expect this logjam to be stay as it is, and sort of the bottom 2 teams to stay the bottom 2, or is there are these sort of top teams going to eat themselves a little bit?
I do think the bottom 2 will stay the bottom 2. Not to say that they can't be competitive and take games off people, but I wouldn't favor them in any set, especially a best of 5 versus any of the other teams. I think in best of 3s, it becomes a little bit more exciting because you take 1 game and then, it's
You're
a little
halfway
bit
there.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think for a best of 5, I think to knock off those other teams will be a lot more difficult. So that would be my guess, that the bottom 2 teams will stay the way they are with the Scarabs and Valkyries. The 5 versus 6 thing, to me, really depends on if Dardes and Fred can get into, the States to play before the end of the year. It seems like they will be able to. So, I think that team, especially if, for me personally, if I'm looking at that roster, they have a lot of really good players, but, for most people, when you see that roster at the start of the year, I view Dardes as like the best or most impactful player. Maybe I shouldn't say best, but like the most impactful, like key member of that roster. Like his god pool, just his like individual talent as a player and everything he brings to a team. And he just hasn't really gotten to be that player because of ping, and same thing with Fred. I know Fred's been very frustrated. Of course, this also applies to Big Men and Genetics and the entire Valkyries roster. So I think all 3 of those teams, if they're able to play some games in the studio, in the States, when the travel ban is lifted in a couple months, I think that'll help them a ton. Until then, I think you're looking mainly at us, Bolts, Leviathans, Titans, and Kings. And I think by Worlds, you will see 6 teams that are very competitive. And it can just be, whoever, feels really confident in the meta, whoever's hot at the right time, never know.
This is a great segue to sort of my next question, especially now that Hazer has, released his video talking a little bit about when we might expect to see some of these EU players coming over to the States. I think he said that some players have interviews later on in October and in early November. So I think there's a pretty high chance that we'll see players here at the very latest by the end of November or early December, I would imagine, right? Especially if they have interviews, coming up soon. So, I think one thing that's gonna happen is some of these teams are definitely gonna get stronger. I imagine, like you said, the Oni Warriors and things like that. Is that of any concern to you guys going into Worlds, that these teams, not only are they gonna have lower ping and things like that at the world stage, but also they might be coming in with a chip on their shoulder, like, hey, everything's been going against us for the past 9 months, 10 months, whatever, and now we're finally here to show up. Is that any concern to you guys sort of going into Worlds with all these EU players coming over?
Not really. It doesn't change how we prepare, for sure. If anything, it's kind of a little bit more annoying to have to think that they're on ping, because I don't want to, I don't think about it going into a set. It doesn't impact my picks and bans, or how I view the team or whatever. I'm sure it impacts their play.
Right.
But yeah, it's not really something I want to account for. I treat it as if they were all playing on the same ping. I actually think a bit of a funny dynamic is, I actually think there's potential where, like, if a team has just been waiting that out and they're like, oh, once we're all together, we'll be playing really well. I actually think there's potential where, like, if you do get to that point and you aren't playing very well, that, it could start to feel pretty demoralizing pretty quickly,
Right.
and start to bring up a lot more issues potentially. Where, not to say that people are coasting right now, but you have that excuse in the back of your head always. Not that anyone wants to rely on that, not that anyone wants the situation to be how it is, but you do have that in the back of your head. So I don't know. For me, the main team that I think gets a lot better from it should just be the Warriors. I think mid jungle is such an important combo to have. And I think with the Kings, genetics and big man, not to say that they wouldn't play better with lower ping, because I think they would, but I think for the most part how that team functions, they've been able to kind of do their job. And I think thankfully for genetics, a lot of the meta guardians have not been super mechanically intensive. Like, if we lived in a world where Ares was like the top pick and it was like really hard for him to hit chains, then you're probably feeling that a little bit. Or like, if it was Hercules from last year, you're probably feeling that pretty hard. But it's not as bad, I think, with the current meta this year. So yeah, I think mainly for me, Fred being an assassin player and Dardes being like a Morrigan player, those sets of characters are just so hard to execute on and high ping that if they can get over here, that I think it'll help that team a lot.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the Morgan ult on normal ping, and then thinking like, oh, what if
Yeah,
there's 120 ping?
Yeah, the amount of times he must have had that, like, in scrims, just get canceled and then not be able to use a single button, I bet's been infuriating.
Yeah, that's I can just imagine how frustrating that has to be.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, I'm all out of questions here, so now I'm gonna ask, like, who's inting in the scrims? Who you trying to call out for doing disrespectful things on the battleground? And if you don't have anyone to call out, go ahead and shout out some people that are supporting you, or anyone you want to give shout outs to. And of course, if you have any thoughts about SPL or Smite in general, I want to give you, the players, a soapbox to vent their thoughts. So the floor is yours, Mike.
Well, just of course, thanks for everyone that tunes into the SPL and is a fan and supports everybody, not just our team. You might even hate our team. That's completely fine. But yeah, thanks for supporting the league. It means a lot to everybody involved. And, other than that, if I'm thinking about who in scrims, my entire team was late today. So that kind of tilted me right off the start. I was really annoyed with that. And normally people just take turns. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's, Alex, sometimes it's Max. It's always Tyler. He always finds a way to feed. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Just having fun, scrimming, playing good old Smite game. And I think the game's in a really fun spot right now. I think it's a really interesting meta, and I think a lot of the patches have been good, and I'm excited for the new map. Get a little winter theme going on.
Oh yeah,
so,
it's gonna be nice.
Yeah, I think everything's looking up.
Yeah, last thing to shout out. Do want to shout out shop.smiteproleague.com. Get yourself some nice Dragons merch here.
Yeah, there you go.
And be sure to support the players and the league here a lot. And I just want to give you my appreciation, Mike. Thanks a lot for joining me here, and it was a great time talking to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I wish you the best of luck in Phase 3 and going forward to Worlds as well.
Thank you.
It's that time again where we make our picks for the next week of SPL coming up here. AlphaJackal, why don't we start with you on the first set of Week 4, the Camelot Kings versus the Jade Dragons. Who you got in this one?
This is going to be a difficult one. I think this one shaping up to be probably the set of the week for me.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm gonna say it's a 2-1, and I'm gonna be a bit spicy. I'm gonna go for the Kings. I'm gonna put the Kings 2-1.
Adapting. How about you? Who do you think is gonna win this set?
Yeah, it's a bit of a question mark. So I'm not sure. I think Kings are gonna take it 2-1 as well. Actually. Yeah, I think so. If to explain well, I'll take Kings 2-1.
Dolson, what about you?
I'll be contrarian. I'll say the Jade Dragons. I think it's going to be a 3-game set.
Yeah.
I do think it'll be a 3-game set. I truthfully am feeling like 51% Jade Dragons, 49% Camelot Kings. In my eyes, I'm just betting on whether or not the chaos and the aggression version of the Jade Dragon shows up or not. I think it does, and I think it's going to be contested. But I'll be the odd man out. I'll say Dragons to create some intrigue.
All right.
Yeah, would certainly be like a big statement if one of these teams got a 2-0 in
True.
this set, I feel.
Yeah, I think that would
So
mean a lot.
that'll be a huge confidence boost for either team here.
All right, Adapting, let's start with you on the next set of week 4. The Atlantis Leviathans versus the Oni Warriors. Who you got in this one?
Leviathans too. I think the Leviathans are. I mean, usually they are the benchmark when it comes to like online play, and they've just been looking really good. So, and even when they like make mistakes, they still win. So, I just think they're gonna win 2-0.
Dolson, how about you?
Yeah, big agree with Adapting here. I think the Oni Warriors, this is a pretty big statement given what I just said, where they've continued to improve. They've at least shown up against the top teams. I do think it's a 2-0. I think the Leviathans are just too good. I think there'll be some moments though in these games where the Oni Warriors make it interesting. But the Leviathans they're playing too clean in my opinion right now.
Yeah. AlphaJackal, you feel the same way about the Levi's here?
Yeah, I think Leviathans 2-0 this set. Oni Warriors could make the set difficult, but I still think Leviathans take it 2-0.
Sure. All right, Dolson, let's start with you here for the Jade Dragons versus the Tartarus Titans. Who you got in this one?
God, we got good sets this week. Oh my goodness. I think this will be a 3-gamer. I don't know why. I have something in my belly about the Dragons this week. I think the Dragons will win in 3. God, this is gonna be I feel like it'll be a brawl in the jungle. I think Sam and Layers will have the spotlights on them in this one. I think the Dragons win it in 3, but I'm not saying that one with much more confidence than I said earlier on.
Sure. AJ, who you got in this one? Jade Dragons versus Tartarus Titans.
3-game set. I say Jade Dragons. I say Titans win game number 1, and then Dragons just come back and win 2-0. So 2-1 total.
2-1 for Dragons. Adapting? Is this going to be a Dragon sweep?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a Dragon sweep as well, 2-1. Not too much to add to it.
Sure. All right, AJ, let's start with you for the next set here. The Olympus Bolts versus the Solar Scarabs. Who you got winning?
I have the Bolts winning this one. On the fence about whether it's 2-1 or 2-0. It depends on which Solar Scarabs turn up. If it's the one that we know that they can play to, then it's a 2-1. If it's the one that turned up against the Valkyries, then it should be a 2-0. I'm going to say with how both teams played last week, I'm going to say Bolts 2-0.
Okay. Adapting, how about you? Olympus Bolts versus Solar Scarabs here.
I think it's going to be 2-0.
2-0 for Bolts?
Yeah, for Bolts, sorry. Yeah. I think, I wouldn't be surprised if Scarabs take a game. I don't think they'll win the set, but I do think it's more likely Bolts 2-0.
Sure. Dolson, how about you? You think the Scarabs are going to keep on their game 2 win streak here? Or,
Yeah, so I think the Bolts win, and so I'm betting on them for the set. But I don't think I can bet against the Scarabs in game 2 wins. Not just yet. So I think it's a 3-gamer. I think the Bolts take 1 and 3, and the Scarabs will take game 2. I'm getting real specific with my predictions, but that's my bet.
Hey man, for all you channel points gamblers out there, Scarabs game 2s. So
yeah, you heard it here
first. Pretty
first.
solid bet, okay?
We have Oracle Dolson on the podcast this week.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Adapting, let's start with you for the next set of the week here. The Oni Warriors versus the Valhalla Valkyries. Who do you think's taking the win?
So, given Valhalla's or the Valkyries' history, they've not been really winning. So I'm gonna say 2-1 Warriors though, because Valks have been playing better. I don't think they'll take the set though. Sadly, I think the Warriors have also been looking better, but. I feel like if they can get off they seem to be able to find 1-game wins here and there when they can get comps people aren't accustomed to. And so I can see Valks getting away with that again.
Dolson, how about you? Oni Warriors versus the Valhalla Valkyries.
Yeah, this will be a pretty telling set. I think, for both teams. We'll get a look at the Warriors earlier on in the weekend, but this is another set, again, where if the storyline around the Warriors is that they've improved, this is a set they should win. And so I do think they will. I think they'll take it. Oh, man, 2-0, 2-1. I don't know. I think 2-0. I think the Warriors will take it 2-0. But I'm happy and excited to be proven wrong if the Valkyries can continue their run of form here.
Sure. AJ, you feel pretty much the same way? Oni's probably going to win?
Yeah, I'd say Oni's definitely the favorites in this set. 2-0, I'm gonna say, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Valkyries took a game. I'd be surprised if they took the set. So 2-0 to the Onis.
Sure. All right, Dolson, last set of week 4, the Atlantis Leviathans versus the Tartarus Titans. A lot of bangers this week. So
yeah, good.
Who you got in this one?
I'm taking Leviathans over anyone in the league right now. So I'll go Levies. I do think this one will go. Ooh, am I gonna hesitate? I was gonna say 3. I think it'll go 3. I do. I think the Leviathans, a team that's good enough at closing out these sets, but also a team that we've seen in some 3 gamers here recently. So Leviathans win. Titans don't make it easy though, and we'll go all 3.
AJ, who you got in this one? Levi's versus Titans.
Same as Dolson, I'm fancying the Leviathans to win pretty much all their sets. I'm gonna say 2-0 to the Leviathans.
All right, Adapting, finish us off for week 4 here.
Yeah, I actually agree with the 2-0 for Leviathans. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to game 3. I mean, it should probably be a 3-game set, seeing as Titans is also a top team.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the Leviathans are gonna have a good week.
Well, that brings us to the end of week 4. Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown this week. Be sure to catch us every week right here on twitch.tv/SmiteGame before the SPL. And if you want to catch extended cuts or past episodes of the SPL Rundown, be sure to check us out on YouTube. Just search for APM Productions. If you have any ideas for future guests, feel free to DM me on Twitter @APM2 or @APM Productions. And finally, I just want to give a big thanks to my 3 wonderful guests here, and I'll give them some time to shout themselves out here. AlphaJackal, why don't you start us off? Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter @AlphaJackal, Twitch @AlphaJackal as well, and yeah, that's where you can find me.
Adapting, how about you?
Twitch/TheAdapting, Twitter/Adapting, YouTube search Adapting, Instagram AdaptKing. That's it for me.
Yeah. And Dolson, where can our viewers find you?
Yeah, sorry guys, I don't really stream. You can look at my stream. I might be on there like once a month. But if you really want to find me, Twitter and Instagram, both @Dolson Live, and that's me.
Thanks a lot for coming on, guys. And thank you for watching. We'll see you guys again next week.